so the title of my 15-minute presentation is "No Coach, No Maximum Gain: The Role of the Coach in Positive Development in Sport." Okay, and I want to start. We're going to talk about positive development, psychosocial development of children in sport, with a very simple question. See what you think. Let me see if I can get that through. Okay, there we go. So, is a sport good for kids? Okay, I'll let you think about that one for 5 seconds. Okay, so now, yeah, according to a lot of people, okay, and according to, for example, UNICEF and the IOC, sport has been proposed as a tool for positive personal and community development. Now, we have to be careful because I think one of the main critiques that have been applied to sport as a tool for personal or community development is that actually sometimes we present it as if it was something magical, like the genie in Aladdin's lamp. Okay, that sport is like the lamp. That the moment you rub it, the moment you're in touch with sport, then straight away you're going to become a better person, or your life is going to be better. Okay, and that's been one of the main critiques really of this area of work. And therefore, we've had to do a lot of research to try and establish how this happens and when it happens. Okay, so we're doing at the moment, not only ourselves, there's a huge group of people around the world, and we are really indebted to them. People like Dan Gould or Martin Camire, who's going to be speaking in the next webinar, or Jean Cote, or Nick Holt. They've done incredible work in this area, okay, and many, many others. So we're just trying to build on the shoulders of giants really a little bit, and understand how sport can be positive for personal development. And like I say, a lot of these researchers and ourselves have looked at what might be the key developmental factors, okay? Because as we were saying, it's not really, it doesn't work like a magic bullet or the magic lamp, okay? It doesn't always work. It looks a lot more like a game of Tetris, where all the pieces have to fall in the right place for sport to be a positive experience for the child, and also for sport to become, to contribute to the psychosocial development of the child, okay? And some of those pieces have been explained in the literature. So for example, the general atmosphere of the program, okay? So how is the program welcoming? What's the culture around the program? For example, or another one is the orientation of the program. Is the program, let me move the slides, there we go. Does it have a community orientation? Is it firmly set within a community and perhaps continuing the values of the community, perhaps having an influence on the community? What else? What about the resources and the assets? You know, what's available to the program to make an impact on people? And that could be material resources, could be community, could be human resources. What about the interpersonal relationships? How positive are those, and how conducive to development are those? We also know that for development to happen, one of the main things that is being talked about in the literature is that the programming has to be intentional, that we have to plan activities that are going to produce this development. And we have to provide quality activities. Not any activity will do. They have to be quality ones. Interestingly as well, what's been said before is that for the activity to be successful in developing the psychosocial side of the young person, it has to be tailored to the individual, and we have to respect individuality. Okay. And finally, in line with that, we also know that it really depends on how long the young people spend in the environment. So a young person that does 50 minutes of sport, one session a week, may be impacted in a different way than someone that is in a talent development environment, spending 15, 20 hours a week in the environment. Okay. So with all this in mind, we did a bit of a study a few years ago to look at what happens really in a talent development environment. We targeted a talent development environment that had a reputation for being really mindful about not only developing athletes, but developing people. And we went into that environment to study it. The study has been published, in case you want to have a look at the full study, in the International Journal of Sports Psychology. And it was part of this very large ethnographic study, which means that we were in the environment for a year, just observing the environment on a day-to-day basis of a youth performance talent development environment. And the main goal of the whole study was to understand how sport can enhance personal and social development in young athletes. Let me tell you just quickly about the sample, about the people that we looked at. Okay, so we were in a performance sport club, and we interviewed parents and athletes that had been out of the club for 10 years. So people that had been at the club and left the club 10 years ago. Okay. Because we wanted to see what they thought 10 years later. We also interviewed players and coaches that were in the environment right now. So we wanted to get the perspective of the people that have been through it and the people that are in the environment now. And we also talked to a lot of the coaches in the environment, and we also spent time in the environment just seeing people and interacting with people. Okay, so overall, we found that coaches, parents, and players reported all these developmental outcomes as possibilities. Okay, that in sport, when you get it right, it's very good for the development of the self, your identity, your self confidence, your self perspective, very good for emotional development. So, in that sense, your ability to control your emotions, your ability to understand other people's emotions, also good for social development, your ability to be competent in social situations, in groups, your moral development, your decision making about what's right and what's wrong and how to behave, your cognitive development, your way, your ability to learn, your ability to think, to take information in, to produce information for others, and overall also the idea of life and professional skills, which again will be the topic in the next webinar with Martin and Ian in a couple of weeks. Okay, so we saw that we were able to achieve all those objectives. Okay, but we were very keen to understand the mechanisms that lead to those development outcomes, because we know knowing that it happens is not good enough. We need to understand how we can make them happen more often, and that's what we were trying to do. And we discovered four main categories of mechanisms. Okay, and we call them the attention factory, the greenhouse for growth, the personal boost, and the real life simulator. And just very quickly there, the attention factory is just the fact that the environment really captured the imagination of the young people because they loved the game, okay, that they were playing. It was a team sport, and because it gave their lives purpose. Okay. In terms of the greenhouse for growth, that was all about the conditions within the environment that laid the foundation for development to happen. And it was a very humanistic club ethos, followed by matching coach behaviors and lots of support from parents and from others in the environment. We also saw that there was something called the personal boost, which is thing that made the young players feel good about themselves. And being successful in sport was one of them. Being recognized as sporty in the community, in the school was important. And also the fact that the sport was like a steam release, right? Where they could go and just forget about everything else in life and just enjoy themselves there. And finally, that the club environment provided this real life simulator where they were exposed to things that will happen in life later on, but they happen in the sport environment early. And that was related to being part of a team, to learning, the diversity of the club, the having to compete, and the idea of at the club they were able to do small jobs like refereeing, like coaching the younger kids, and that was like a mini workplace. Okay, what about the coach? Because this is about the coach now. All of that was about things that happen in the whole club. But what we saw in our study is that the coach was a fundamental part of all of this. The coach was involved in the majority of these mechanisms. Okay, so we need to understand what are these mechanisms really relate to the coach. And we saw three main types of mechanisms, okay, that are related to the coach. One of them is high expectations and demands on the part of the coach. The other one is genuine care, and I'll explain what this means in a second. And the other one is this idea of the transformational coach. So let's go through each of those and what outcomes they yielded, okay? So in terms of high expectations and demands, we saw that the coaches instilled a culture of hard work that matched the culture of the club. But at the same time, we're always about the greater good, They were always instilling this idea of whatever we do individually has to be good for everybody else. They, based on that, they really encourage players to play a role and accept their roles within the team, and to really respect everybody, not only in the team but throughout the club. Okay, and these behaviors of the coaches led to the following outcomes as identified by the players and their parents. Okay, emotional control, cooperation skills, self-confidence, a higher learning ability, work ethic, respect, competitiveness, and self-reliance. But it's not always positive, okay? These behaviors could also, for some players, turn into negative outcomes, like low emotional well-being, for example, because, for example, this idea of hard work, okay? And how that leads to certain expectations, and those could lower your emotional well-being or lower your self-confidence, okay? And a couple of quotes there from parents and players for you to read that illustrate this point. Okay, so we're moving to the next one. The idea of coaches having genuine care for the athletes, okay? And what that was is that the coaches really embraced the humanistic philosophy of looking at these young people as young people first rather than athletes. But also the coaches had a personal disposition. A lot of them were teachers or former teachers or work in the health professions. So they had a disposition to look after people. And that led to emotional well-being, a sense of belonging, a sense of hope and purpose about the future, self-confidence, and respect. Okay, and this part didn't have any negative outcomes. It was all positive. So just an example of what one of the coaches said here. Okay. And finally, the idea of the transformational coach, how coaches acted as inspirational figures, role models, and teachers of life lessons, okay? Leading to all these outcomes: emotional literacy, emotional control, interpersonal skills, sense of hope and purpose, self-confidence, moral decision making, work ethic, and competitiveness. And again, these didn't seem to have any negative effects. Just some examples there. And we get now to the crux of the argument here, okay? Traditionally, we've looked at this as, okay, there's two ways to make an impact on the psychosocial development of people in sport, with young people, okay? The explicit approach or the implicit approach. The explicit approach really talks about where we do one-to-one interviews, we do workshops with a sport psychologist to help them with timekeeping, with emotional control, with self-regulation. And the other approach is the implicit, okay? The environment is set up in a particular way, okay? It's a competitive environment. So therefore we learn to compete, okay? And there's been a debate really in the literature around which of those is best, okay? And we've gone from the explicit approach being proposed as the best thing to then now we are in a place where we're kind of saying, look, it's a combination, okay? All these people are doing studies that show that it is a combination of these things. Now, we took it a bit further and said, well, look, actually, maybe talking about explicit and implicit only is not the only way, because what we felt, and we were influenced by the literature by these guys here, Keegan and Lahi, okay, that actually maybe what we need to look at is this deliberate or non-deliberate? Are coaches and clubs deliberately or non-deliberately trying to impact on the development of young people? Because that's different from explicit and implicit, and I'm going to show you why. You can be explicit and deliberate about what you do, for example, and that would be a workshop, a one-to-one meeting, the use of teachable moments, very explicit, okay? You could be deliberate and implicit in the way you create a team or a club culture or standards, in the way you promote individual and team accountability and responsibility. So you're not constantly hammering on it, okay? But it is there in the environment, okay? And you've planned it in a way, you've created it in a way that is having an impact It's deliberate, but it's implicit. Okay. Or you can be non-deliberate and implicit. You don't do anything, but the environment itself has certain features that lead to this internal competition, the risk of deselection, and external competition, and how these things impact on the development of the young person. Okay. Now, what we're saying is we need to be aware of all of this, because depending on in which quadrant of this you are, your job as a coach is different. So if you are in the explicit and deliberate, your job is to plan for these things. Okay. If you're in the deliberate and implicit, your job is to foster these things, to promote them. And if you are in the implicit and non-deliberate, your job is to be careful and manage these things. You can't avoid them. Okay. They exist, but you have to be prepared to manage the impact of this, to turn it into positive impact where possible, or minimize the negative impact. Okay. So foster, and what are the conclusions? Okay. So yes, personal development can be achieved through sport, and it can be implicitly or explicitly. But what we are saying is that we need to be deliberate about it. Okay. So we can maximize the positive outcomes through planning and fostering of certain things, and managing the potential negative impact of the implicit and non-deliberate elements. Okay. And very, very important for coaches out there, that being a caring leader is a catalyst and a buffer, catalyst for the good things and a buffer against the negative things that exist in the environment. Okay. And I'm just going to leave you with some references there for you guys to consult if you want. But that's me done.